All right. I've just gone live, like about the same second my guest appeared backstage. So, I mean, yep, he's got his shirt on. We're good to go.
I
Zane
did
Libertarian.
put a
It's
shirt
worth
on.
checking.
What's that?
It's worth checking.
It is. It always
I'm
is. You gotta
I'm
be careful.
exaggerating. It's not like this is a national convention. Of course, we have our clothes on.
I know, right?
That's right. So I had not read your plan until today. So Andrew has a plan. He put it on a website. I read it. For people who have been watching for a while, I sort of subscribe to Larry Sharp's plan, the quick plan QICC. But one of the things I'm a big fan of is we try different things. We need open minds. We need to explore different things. So Andrew has a plan, and I went, yay! Let's see what Andrew's up to, because Andrew's a bright guy. But
Yeah.
before we
Thank you.
talk about, well, let's just you edify. You talk up the guest. That way, it's believable.
Sure. Absolutely.
Don't tell people that's how it works, though. It's kind of a trade secret. But anyway,
We'll keep it between you, me, and Facebook.
Yeah. But good practice before we review the solution. What's the problem? What are we fixing?
Well, the problem we're fixing is police reform, as you'd want to call it.
Yep.
The issue is how our police has gotten to where it is,
right?
How we bring it on back to something that is a lot closer to what we need, and more importantly, too, offering ideas that are libertarian based, but as well as the general public can consume.
Right.
Sometimes, when we present ideas as libertarians, and some libertarians, and I know Robert, some too as well, they'll just say, hey, I get rid of the police and you just pay for private security and that's on you to defend yourself completely. And though I understand the argument, neither me nor you
I got my police force right here.
Hey, I carry all the time,
Sure. Well, I don't carry all that all the time. It would get heavy.
I carry all the time. But and what I think is rather than having, I don't want to so much debate about whether or not anarchy is a good idea or a bad idea. I hate to tell you, it's never gonna happen, right? It's just not. So let's instead work within what we have and create an idea and a system that has libertarian ideals in it, and that is a system that, and I know as you read through it, you probably saw, we have a lot of the framework already set up for it. It's not a far leap from where we are to there.
And I think our anarchist friends, because we have them.
And we do.
And unlike
death, though.
Yeah, and unlike a lot of people, I can say I'm not an anarchist, and I don't mean I'm not an anarchist. I just mean, it's like I'm not gay. I'm not an anarchist. It's just
right. It's
nothing
just
against
not
anyone.
My cup of tea, I guess you could say, for sure. Not my cup of tea, but
I think our anarchist friends would look at your plan as an incremental improvement.
I think so. I think it kind of marries some of their ideas of a degree of voluntary choices involved in the process, a lot more so. But at the same time, it has the realisticness of your defense not being dependent upon your ability to pay for it necessarily, your right to life.
Right. Well, and another important stakeholder is law enforcement. And I know you as a businessman, so,
yes,
getting with the lingo there, stakeholder, the idea that, law enforcement has an interest in this too.
And not just an interest in it, but a way, how do we work our way forward and in a way too, where we are able to support the police. And that's part of what the article at the beginning talks about, where I write about my own personal life experience a little bit, And, we can dig down into that. But I think there's, and the reason why I felt the need to do it, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of why the people are all suddenly so coalesced around this idea that police are bad, for lack of a better term, to make it easy. And police are feeling that heat, and they want to know how to get it off of them. And I think they're also rather confused. I mean, rewind a year ago, and, we wouldn't be having a discussion anywhere near defund the police. That would have been considered wild-eyed and crazy.
Right.
But yet that's a chant we hear all the time.
Well, I think I don't know how many people see this from the perspective I do. I really don't know. We can never really answer that question. We go, I think a lot of people would agree with you. Don't know.
Sure.
But this has kind of been a hot topic for me since 2014, since I helped David Patterson run for Senate. But because there were nothing bad ever happened between me and police. But I saw sort of second person, people I trusted, people I knew, telling me these stories. And I'm like,
too, there's a misunderstanding of, defining a bad moment. And that's kind of where I start off to explain. So for an example, a bad experience for someone can be something, and this happens a lot. I have some stats on this. Someone breaks into your house and steals stuff. You call the police. The crime never gets solved. That creates animosity between the police and the individuals. And that is where, where I talked about the beginning there, I understand we've had these interactions with unarmed men and obviously black men in this case being shot by the police. But you and I both know of many stories of no matter your color, white being shot by the police. We know exceptionally. I can't remember the gentleman's name right offhand, but there's a hotel shooting where he was on the ground, arms out. They asked him to show his ID. He reaches for his ID in the back pocket and is shot on the ground.
Right.
And watching that video, he wasn't moving fast. There's nothing there, and so those look like one-off flashpoints. And what I see is right pundits stating off, well, only 20 unarmed black men were shot last year. This isn't a systematic issue.
Right.
And then I see left pundits talking about, our black Americans have to worry about being murdered in the street. And that isn't properly representing what the actual sentiment of people is, and why, no matter your race, they're seeing so much push for this police reform. It doesn't focus on why. And, and the reason why is, quite frankly, and I think the reason why these pundits and people don't understand is, for lack of a better term, they've never been, and I don't want to characterize too much, but they've never been poor for a long amount of time at all. Right. And what I mean by that is they've never been in a position where a speeding ticket really can lead to a series of issues that occur. And in the article, I talk about my own speeding ticket that I got, and I couldn't afford to pay, so I went to court to try to alleviate, and they gave me the option of going to traffic court or traffic class, where you're going to sit in class for a day. It's like, oh, yeah, sure, that's a trade-off. And that alone, just talk about going to court. Let's talk about just going to court for a speeding ticket. You show up, and at your designated time, and you're waiting in line. Now, Perry, have you ever had to go to court for a speeding ticket before?
A moving violation.
A moving violation.
Ticket.
Did you go yourself, or did you have a lawyer go?
I went by myself.
So, as you know, you have to wait for all the lawyers to go first. So already, the individuals that can already afford an attorney to represent them are getting preferential treatment over you in the process. So already right off the bat, that can leave a bad taste in an individual's mouth. You go through that process, and for me, I decided, okay, I was, I think, 19 at the time, 20. I was just starting out in the world. I was, I had a job. I was, by all accounts, the beginning of my climb on the American dream. I'm not even 30 yet, and I'm a wealthy individual now. Didn't go to college, so I was starting my climb on that American dream, which is real and exists, and I'm an example of that. And I took the option to go to this traffic court. They just never got in contact with me. They never sent me a letter telling me it was time to go, what have you.
Right.
And my license got suspended. And I remember it being so, I didn't know what to do. I felt like my life had totally ended to the point where I had my son, he was maybe 2 at the time or whatever. And I broke down and started crying in front of him. Because I got this letter, my license is suspended. I don't know what to do. I already didn't have the money to pay for the speeding ticket. Now I got to come up with the money to reinstate my license. I can't go to I can't go to work to
Right.
get a job to pay for the without driving. You know, we live in Kentucky where you live. You know, not having a license, not having a car is the difference between getting to go to work or not.
Right.
You know, that and for the case of
Well,
at that time,
for a law-abiding person, it is anyway.
well, yeah. And so, you know, you have to make that choice of, oh, I risk getting pulled over. Well, I get pulled over. My kid's in the car. Now I had to deal with that situation.
Right.
And, you know, missing out on that and the way that those simple interactions for an individual not of means can have such large life ramifications. We have to recognize that to understand where it's coming from. And then secondary, recognize the complete and utter failure of our current police system to actually solve everyday crimes.
Right.
In 2000, I have the stats for it if you want. In 2019, let's talk about minor crimes of theft, right? So this is larceny theft was solved, well, cleared. That doesn't mean solved, that doesn't mean prosecuted. So you guys know, cleared means they either took it to court or they identified who'd done the deed, but for whatever reason, they can't take them to court. But solve the crime. Okay, so this isn't even just prosecuted. This doesn't count. You know, they are acquitted, right? This is solve the crime. Larceny, theft, 18.4% of cases solved. Property crime, 17.2% of cases solved. Burglary, 14.1% of cases solved. Grand theft auto, 13.8% of cases solved. That's according to Statista.com. If you guys want to check me on that. But those rates are incredibly low. And I can tell you, to go into why I see a problem with police, I was at a golf course here in Lexington. A nice golf course, busy middle of the day. You know, not the place you exactly expect to be the victim of theft, right? I'm on hole 17, and my wife gets a notification that her credit card is used at a gas station. And we're like, wow, that's weird. That must be a mix-up or something. So we finish out our hole, finish out 18, head back to the car, and I find our back window had been busted out of my car, and my wife's purse was stolen. And it was down in the floorboards there. In my wife's car was her firearm. You know, as I mentioned, I carry. My wife always carries. We both, before it was legal in Kentucky, we both had our CCDWs, have them. And we went through the trouble of finding the individual. This individual was particularly dumb. I don't know. But we turned off all of our cards, but we still
he was in the 18% of dumbest criminals.
Right. Well, and this is why they're getting away with it. Okay, so we identified he used the card. And I know it was a he, used the card at a finish line in just before the river in Louisville, or just across the river in Louisville, right? Southern Indiana. He tried to use his rewards card. So that's how we got his name and like his info and stuff. So keep in mind, this is a stolen firearm, right? Which we're told is a big concern.
Right.
And so we discover we have him on video using the card. We've got his name. We check him out on Facebook. We know he lives in Southern Indiana. They provide us with his last known address that Finish Line has. We called the detective here in Lexington that's handling it. And he's like, I'll call them up there and see if they'll do anything about it. Long story short, the guy's never caught. We even know who the guy is.
Right.
We know where he lives. They didn't bother going to pick him up.
Right.
It was more work, you know? And so when you see those solve rates at that, so you've got individuals, and who are the victims of crimes? Well, most often it is not the top tier of individuals. It is lower and middle class. So you have a group of individuals that get hit with minor offenses like speeding, traffic, moving violations, offenses that we know the police kind of have some discretion over issuing, which either, which is part of the problem. Either you issue it or you don't, playing it this whole pick and choose thing actually creates more animosity in a way because,
Well,
quite frankly,
I did try to get David Patterson on tonight, and he was busy. I gave him too late a notice, and he has actual job to do. But
unlike you and
me. Well, yeah. For now, I've received notice that I'm going back to work on a project. I said, "How late can I start?" And they said, "Well, November 4th." I'm like, "All right, we'll see. We'll see how I do." But anyway, I do recall from conversations with him that he would talk about getting direction on what they're supposed to focus. The city council, the people who are in charge of the city. I mean, they do tell the police what to focus on, and sometimes there's like little incentives, like maybe if you write this many tickets related to improper use of child constraints, your city gets a little bonus budget from the state. And I might be quoting that a little wrong because it's a story that's about 6 years old in my mind.
Right.
But it's not that, and especially like David Patterson, I've never heard David Patterson go, "Woohoo, I get to go write speeding tickets." I mean,
yeah, of course.
But
well, and that's a prime example.
We elect people. I mean, that we move these decisions. Somebody making this decision's pandering to some group.
Well, and that's part of the problem that I kind of address in a way is that the idea with our federal government, our state government, is a separation of powers.
Mm-hmm.
However, we don't have in most local levels a clear and defined separation of powers where you have council members, which are members of legislation, that then he wasn't there last night. Okay, he doesn't count. Anyways, legislation, and then you have the executive branch, which should be the enforcement side of things, but they're over here getting their directives from the legislative branch, which is a breakdown of how it's supposed to occur, and kind of and it gets real interesting as you dig into certain municipalities too, such as Louisville, where they have a lot of little incorporated cities within the city of Louisville. So I don't know if you're aware of what I mean by that, but so there might be a.
But explain it anyway.
Well, yeah.
Wait, I didn't do that right. I'm not quite sure I do understand. Please explain.
Well, in these well-to-do neighborhoods, there is basically beefed up homeowners association. So instead of a HOA president and boards, you have a mayor and a city council. And instead of just security guards for your area, you have actual police officers. And what that does is it creates a patchwork of laws. So for an example, the most common one and why I'm so familiar with it is because my way of clawing up the fiscal chain was I was a door-to-door salesman and I worked in Louisville. And there was this patchwork of solicitation laws. Now, when an HOA is involved and they just put up a sign that says no soliciting, that is a suggestion. Unless there is, because they do not have an enforcement branch to that. They just decide to put up a sign. The police department is under no obligation to enforce that sign at all, nor can they, because that was not an ordinance passed by the legislative body that they are responsible for reporting to, or, well, responsible for enforcing from. So if you want to put some teeth on things like no soliciting laws, you have to become an incorporated city, hire a police department, and then you pass these no soliciting laws, and they're able to arrest you for soliciting then in those areas, right? Unless you get a permit or, however they want to write their laws. That creates an extreme patchwork of it as well, of where, once again, you're seeing the policing of more well-off individuals experiencing an entirely different police involvement and police experience than individuals who can't afford to do so, and it's creating the animosity, which is calling for reform, and that's where the plan comes from. It's a
let's
3-point
let's
plan.
yeah, let's go over some of the points. And just for giggles, I'm going to paste in the URL to the plan.
Sure.
And everybody should be able to see it in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. And then also, I'll share the screen so you don't have to bother to go there.
I know. Sorry if there's any spelling errors, but my editor is my wife, so you can bring that up with her.
Way to kick her under the bus.
I will throw her under that bus.
So, go ahead.
So the first thing they're going to see, there's abolishing the Metro Police Department. So the idea behind, once again, going into where I talked about the patchwork of laws in Louisville,
right?
The reasoning why there's a Metro Police Department versus a Sheriff Department. So take the city of Lexington for an example. It is the Lexington Fit urban county government. So the sheriff and LMPD, Lexington Police Department, share the same jurisdiction. And what the sheriff in this area has been relegated to is basically accompanying funerals and working on traffic direction for parades or things like that, and being essentially security guards you can kind of hire out for the county if you need the more security. You can have the sheriff and serving maybe some warrants, serving summons, things like that, right?
I got distracted looking at David's comment, but so maybe you covered it. But if you didn't, the sheriff is actually named in Kentucky's Constitution,
right?
So they're pretty well here. We know,
right? And,
we know where they came from,
right? And so the sheriff,
and they're elected.
They're elected, and that's the key there. Giving up now. One of the thing, however, when it comes to the sheriff, is and kind of part of the plan is breaking up, especially large cities such as New York and things like that, breaking them up into at least smaller municipalities of sorts, where you, on average, you have one officer for every 1,000 population in your area. Now, obviously, that's dependent upon the size, geographically speaking, of the area versus the number of people, things like that, how spread out people are. But in general, you have one officer for every 1,000 individuals. So in this, to get more specific than I got there, I would like to see an elected sheriff for every 25,000 individuals. And the reason why that'd create 25 officers, which means when you get stopped and you get pulled over and you ask for a supervisor because you're having an issue with what's going on, I want that supervisor to report to an elected individual. I don't want there to be a giant chain of command where it's hard to hold accountable, but where a supervisor is getting his influence of how he handles things is based upon an elected individual that's saying, I want to get reelected. And I want him to have 2-year terms. I want him to constantly be in that state of wanting to get reelected, right? And but what's now, some of the proponents of it may say, well, at that point, they'll just let all the crimes go. Well, let me ask you, is that how you get elected? No. You get elected by solving the crimes and actually make sure your victims are taken care of and creating a safe environment.
So, David does have a point for us, is a lot of cities have it written into their charters that local police departments are mandated.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm not saying I'm not talking about a giant kind of change for certain areas. Like I know for Lexington, it would be quite a shakeup because we have a county government and we have a city government. We have county commissioners and then we've got a city council. And what in this case you would have to do, and I recognize this, is you'd have to break down that council and become a county council instead of a city council in order to pass the laws.
I'm wondering, I mean, I don't know the exact right way to do this, but I wonder if sheriff ends up getting put in quotes, because if it doesn't, I mean, if we're talking about the actual county sheriff, then we're talking about changing the state constitution as well. But if we quit focusing on the idea that it's sheriff and just abstract to the main point in your idea, just the idea that we have an elected office for roughly every 25,000 people who are under the domain of this elected law enforcement officer or administrator almost, then we start getting somewhere, because, or at least we do in my mind, because then we don't have to start at the state level. Then this becomes something a municipality could take on in order to solve their problems locally.
Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, not getting caught as much in the weeds of
Right.
terminology and stuff, but understanding the spirit of the first idea.
Right.
that we have elected individuals. The whole entire point is when you call a supervisor out, they're reporting to an elected individual.
Right.
When you feel you've been mishandled, you feel like you have a way. So, a lot of times when people see interactions when you're watching Cops, right? When I'm watching Cops or Live PD.
You watch Cops?
I do. I love watching Cops. It's funny. Anyways, when I'm watching those shows, what I love about Cops or Live PD is how serious the cops pretend to be over some of the silliest, most ridiculous things. Where they're like, oh, well, we found a gun in the trunk. It's like, well, that's a legal way to transport a firearm. I don't really see why this needs to be of conversation.
I was almost on, well, I was recorded once for Cops. I was kind of the bystander, and I had no idea this was going on at the time. But basically, I was just being polite. It's like, hey, sorry to bother you. All I want to know is if you're taking my friend here in, because he has all this equipment rented out. So if you're taking him in, it would be really helpful if you could let me just speak with him for a few minutes so I could understand who to get all this back to, just so I could take care of the logistics of it.
I've run into the same situations myself.
And this cop,
to get things back.
This cop looks at me. He goes, "No, you're fine, but your other friend, she crossed the line." And I'm like, what the?
He's taking himself way too seriously.
Yeah, and like 10 minutes later, I found out there was a camera crew down in the parking lot further, and we were being filmed.
Recorded as far as
I'm like, oh God.
Well, and I can tell you too that, when you watch those shows and you watch the altercations take place, and what people say is, hey, you don't fight with the police, you fight it in the courtroom, right?
Right.
That's easy to say when you can afford to take off work or have a lawyer go down for you. Or
right.
You can handle that. It's not easy to fight it in the courtroom when your car gets impounded and you got to pay for that to get back out. Even if you're found not guilty, you still have to pay for your car impound to get taken back out. I mean, I one time had a car stolen from me, Robert, and the police waited a day to call me about it, and I had a $500 impound bill. I was the victim of theft of my auto, of grand theft auto, right? I was a victim of theft of a motor vehicle, and then I had to pay the police, well, a private impound lot, but I had to pay $500 to get my vehicle back out, and that was very confusing for me. I'm like, I'm already, you don't have to deal with the damages of the vehicle, and
right.
I already have to deal with how do I dispose of the drug paraphernalia legally that was just left in there. I'm like, why didn't cops figure this out? I don't know, So
well, that's the drug paraphernalia was how you were supposed to get the expenses covered. Come on, Andrew.
It was a tip. It was like, sorry about your luck. I'm a police officer. I can't pay you in money, but I'll pay you in heroin.
let's get to the second. Let's get to the second point of your concept here.
And playing off of that, the reason why these arguments occur is because of, going to my second point, more often than not, police have very little actual understanding of what the letter of the law states. Quite frankly, they deal with the same charges in and out.
Right.
Generally speaking, they're doing the same traffic stops. All they need to know is, oh, I found drugs and it's bad. And all they need to know is that, well, this works well enough, I guess, because I heard it through the grapevine. Give you a perfect example. I own a restaurant in a small town. That's 5 police officers. 5. There's not a lot. I know you've heard the story, Robert, but, we'll share it for others. 5 police officers. Not a lot of officers. Not a lot of information needs to be disseminated that can't be handled right from the top, right? Well, during COVID, I guess the governor order and one officer interpreted the governor order to mean that I had to close my restaurant there, and he was going to be the one to tell us we had to close. And so in a department of 5 officers, I had to call the chief of police. Now it's a small town, so I had his number, and I was one of the only 10 business owners in town, so of course I had his number. And I call him up. I'm like, Chief, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, man, he's just confused. Let me talk to him. He talks to him and leaves. Now, what's funnier is that the IGA down the road, the owner of that, didn't call to find out, and they were closed for the rest of the day off of what this officer had said earlier to them.
No.
And so there's a perfect example of an officer being completely unaware of what's going on.
Right.
Because he's working through the grapevine or what he's interpreting or what have you, because at the end of the day, when you're enforcing the law, it is what you interpret the law to mean. And then once you get to court, it's adjudicated whether or not that's the case. Well, if we had a simple court system where I could easily go in and defend myself, or you could, and I didn't have to shell out $1,000 to deal with, a simple situation, that'd be easy enough to handle. But most of us, that's not the case with our current legal system. It's so fraught with intricacies of how to file this and how to say that. And if you do it wrong, you're just found guilty anyways, right? So, when you have issues like that, and you have individuals that need to go to work to the next day, or they're going to lose their job and they're not going to be able to pay their child support, which they're going to go to jail for that too. And they're going to start arguing with you. And they're going to start saying, hey, I don't think this is okay. And
right.
Having that legal advocate on dispatch, and this legal advocate here, what my suggestion would be is they're a clerk for an elected judge. So that way, once again, the individual that is on working the dispatch shift works directly for an elected official. If that makes sense. You look confused. Ask me a question.
Well, my first thought was they could maybe be junior members of the what do you call it? Basically the
public defense.
The public defense, yeah.
Well, and I thought about that too. However, once again, going back to the plan of elections. By being a clerk of an elected judge, you're able to hold their boss responsible.
Right.
Additionally, these clerks are in a unique position. So public defenders, right, also have cases they're working on. You can look at that caseload. You can look at the cost for it. But when you have the clerks, on the other hand, that mainly just do paperwork anyways, and being able to pull shifts on dispatch while doing the paperwork, but also they watch how these cases are handled in the courtroom. Now, most clerks are, I think all clerks, correct me if I'm wrong, are lawyers. They have their law degrees and everything else. They're not just paralegals or anything. They're clerking for elected judges. And it's kind of like an internship of sorts. And they are watching how these things are decided.
Right.
And so when you run into a situation, I think a good happy median, because if you have a public defender, they're always going to say, yeah, I can put up a defense against that, because of course they can. Right? I mean, once again, a victim of a theft, I have the individual on camera stealing it, and without having the text messages where I told them, hey, you weren't supposed to take that, bring that back, and them saying, no, I'm not going to, they wouldn't have prosecuted them, because the defender's like, prove to me that you told him he couldn't get it.
Right.
And
so
made the officers say, we can't charge him.
I think I think one of the interesting advantages of this point is because the person dealing with the law enforcement officer feels like they're speaking to somebody who isn't just, on the side of the law enforcement officer, they may buy into it a little better if somebody can say, look, if you take this in front of my boss, I don't get to, formally make this decision, but my understanding of the law and the way I see him handle this in court about twice a week is he's going to say this. And that might settle the case enough for someone. Now, I don't know what we kind of need Weist on this. We need Patterson. We need some more help on this conversation.
Well, and I think the heart of the second point is to have a advocate on the other side that knows the law.
Right.
That when there's and they're there on dispatch where they are hearing what's going on. And so when you have situations like, hey, I think this is illegal search and seizure. Mm-hmm. That it's not just an officer being like, no, I don't think it is. And then you now having a charge, let's say, brought against you because of illegal search and seizure that gets thrown out anyways, but yet you're out several $1,000s to go to court and deal with the situation. And at the end of the day, you can't really easily recoup your losses when you're found not guilty.
Well, I think a thing to consider is with this sort of guidance from this individual. Can we actually keep more noise out of the courts? I mean,
and that's the other thing too, as well. That is definitely brought up is the savings. How this is paid for is by we don't have as much of these interesting situations gumming up our courts. These low level. Long situations, and you know what? I'm sure the judges don't want to sit there and be dealing with traffic violations all day. They don't want to.
Right. So let's go over this last one, and then during this conversation, I had an idea I think I want to pitch, but mine's quick. But let's go over yours. Final is go ahead.
Finally, is having some type of malpractice insurance. This would be an insurance that you can file against if you're found as a not guilty. Plea. So it will speed up the process if you're found not guilty in a situation due to the misconduct of the police. Basically, you never should have been arrested in the first place, right?
Okay.
Or they've caused undue cost to you. You're able to file against the insurance. Now, the reason why I believe this is so critical is because first, it provides a lawyer class that would be willing to defend and once again reduce our public defender costs, individuals that they believe are truly not guilty because of a misconduct by an officer. Because much like anybody who watches the commercials, these injury attorneys, these attorneys that are suing truck driver accidents and things like that, they're doing it because they collect a 10% fee or a percent or 20% fee of whatever settlement you're offered. And they know they can collect that. They don't need you to pay for it. And that is how the quote unquote, little guy gets his justice. Well, the little guy isn't getting his justice right now when he's found not guilty. And the only way we can do that is to create a profit incentive for lawyers to handle it. But that also creates a profit incentive of sorts for the police to conduct themselves in a manner that is above reproach, which is most important. You're not going to, turn off your body camera if you know that the minute you go to court and your body camera was off, that they can file against you, and now the punitive charges against you are so great. And as well, you can lose your job as an officer everywhere. I mean, look at the Breonna Taylor shooting. The individual who was charged in that for wanton endangerment was an old Lexington Police Department officer that was fired due to overuse of force.
Right.
But yet, he was hired in Louisville. Why? Because there's no database. If they're not charged with a crime, they're not tracked that they did such a thing.
Well, and in fact, and David helped me with this one, is by Kentucky's, I forget what it's called, but it's basically rights for law enforcement officers. There's protections against one department disclosing to another department what the officer was fired for.
Exactly. Well, and that is the case technically. That is kind of the case in general employment as well. when somebody calls you up for an employment reference, all they can ask is, are they rehireable or not? They can't
Right.
actually, you can't go into it and be like, well, they showed up late 6 times on this time, this time, this, that's considered an invasion of privacy as well. But
Mm.
more importantly, much like doctors, much like, a number of professionals, if you get too many things filed against you, you can't be insured. You can't be hired then. That works out bad cops right off the bat because, hey, our insurance won't cover you. I can't hire you. But
Right.
as well, if there's a profit incentive that good officers that don't have claims filed against them, cost the city less money now, they can in turn pass those savings on to the officer, compensating
Right.
good officers more for doing their job properly while
Right.
punishing punitively with their income bad officers. So now you have
Right.
a profit motive for the police on the street to conduct themselves in a manner that does not cause them to have claims against them. Because
Right.
if they get a claim, they didn't get in that race, and
Right.
now, and now that creates that incentive as well. So it
Right.
solves a couple different things. It gives the quote unquote little guy an avenue to be properly compensated for the damages put against him by improper law enforcement. It creates a
Mm-hmm.
profit incentive to the officers to conduct themselves in a proper and meaningful way. And
Right.
it creates a profit incentive for obviously the cities to hire great officers and put them through great training as well. I know Progressive will give me a discount if I attend a driver safety course once a year, or
Mm-hmm.
if I have a car alarm on my car,
Mm-hmm.
versus what kind of car you drive gives you different insurance rates based upon your risk. In the
And also,
same way, if you're
you have the little doodads you plug in now to tell them
you
what
got the
kind of
doodad you
driver you
plug in,
are.
whatever it may be, anything to
Right.
say, hey, you're less risk, right? In the same
Right.
way, saying, oh, hey, you attended, an additional training every year. Your officers do that. We're going to charge you less now, and now we have
Right.
better trained officers on the street for once again a profit incentive, which at the heart of it is kind of libertarian ideal, is to take
Absolutely.
advantage of the profit incentive.
Or one of my favorites is your officers comply with this regime with body cams,
Right.
because one of the things we always kind of get sidetracked on is body cams, when body cams, how much do body cams cost, all these questions about body cams. And I don't want to legislate that, because as soon as you legislate it, something changes and it needs to be different.
Right.
But if you can pawn that off to insurance companies, they'll sort that out. They will sort out how to make sure an officer is protected by the truth.
Well, I mean, I think that's Spike's idea behind getting rid of the licensing boards for doctors,
Mhm.
is that the malpractice insurance companies will more than take care of making sure that
Right.
doctors are properly doing their jobs based upon whether or not how many issues they have filed, whether or not they're still insurable
Right.
or not, and that definitely is, and you know as well, it creates it creates an incentive to actually solve crimes that need to be solved instead of spending time. If I'm an officer and I
Mhm.
see somebody going 10 over the speed limit, or they maybe blow through a stop sign, something that maybe it's a little bit victimless, right?
Uh-huh. Well,
I don't want to
depends.
maybe risk having a negative altercation that could result in a claim.
Right.
Instead, maybe I'd rather spend my time, I don't know, solving the other 87% of burglaries that isn't solved.
Right.
Maybe I want to spend my time like actually, helping out the community more rather
Sure.
than out there trying to get, just claims filed against me, right?
But people blowing through stop signs can endanger others.
It can.
So
It can.
then again, there's the people who, I don't think that was quite a complete stop. I mean, they were looking back and forth, but I'm not sure those wheels
Well,
stopped. Come on.
the question is are you getting pulled over
Right.
because you blew through a stop sign,
Mm-hmm.
or because they're hoping for something else?
Right.
They're doing
Well,
traffic stops. And don't get me wrong, there's been many terrible criminals
sure.
caught through routine traffic stops.
Mhm.
But, you know, it might give you a pause on whether or not this is exactly, or if I conduct myself as an officer in a traffic stop in a way that might be not exactly above reproach, maybe I don't give them that ticket. Maybe I do a little bit more of a thinking about whether or not I really want to make an issue out of this. You know,
So-
maybe I'm a little bit more patient.
So I'm gonna spitball my idea real quick, and
Yes.
I've not talked to anybody about it yet. So this is really rough and probably needs some tweaking. But the core concept's very easy. Is when we were talking about, you know, police being directed as to where to put their time, what to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Just publish it. Just make it transparent. Just, you know, hey, we told our law enforcement officers to focus on this, and this. Hey, this has become a problem as of late, so we've moved this to number one. You know,
Sure.
whatever. And you could also do the flip side of, you know, publishing what people are getting out of their law enforcement. And I've never went and looked. For all I know, they already do this and nobody cares. But
Well,
I think it's an interesting question.
I think it would almost be a natural side effect of the 2-year elected official. He's going to want to make it seem like
Sure.
he's doing his job, right? So
Yeah.
There's been a lot of these crimes. We're going to focus on that. And
Right.
here's all the crimes we've solved over the last time. You know, he wants to make that you know, monthly report to look real good when he has to publish it. And he's going to
That's
publish
right.
it. So, hey, it looks good, you know, and as well, you know, once again, going into the insurance process, there's definitely some incentive for proper reporting to go on there as
Sure.
well. That could be easily adjusted. You know, you definitely want to make sure, you know, you're recording your stats right for that.
Right. Well, one reason I wanted us to talk about this tonight is
Because you like
I think no. I feel like this year the entire issue got so caught up in hyperbole.
It did.
That
and it missed an point.
Almost no one actually tried to solve the problem. I mean, Larry Sharp came out really early with his attempt.
And
but
what you see,
the people, the two N's, the D's and the R's, they're not interested in solving this problem. They're interested in figuring out how to capitalize on it. Or at least that's how I feel.
Well, or what you saw was, once again, surface-based solutions such as, don't get me wrong, ending qualified immunity, civil asset forfeiture, you know, those definitely are issues that need to be addressed. Don't
Absolutely.
Get me wrong. But once again, and which no one really talked about, which is kind of the reason why I felt a need to, is nobody's addressing why everybody hates the cops. And it's not necessarily because they're shooting a bunch of unarmed people. That's a boiling point. But it's because you got pulled over and now you owe $1,000 and your license is suspended. Or you're a victim of a crime and, like most of them, it didn't even get solved or taken care of.
Right.
And then, but meanwhile, I've got this ticket over here. You know, I tell you what, I had a situation, I don't say too much, where a contractor of mine, a independent contracting company, had an employee
named Bob Phillips. No, I'm kidding.
No,
go ahead. I don't even know his name.
Steal a quote unquote, we'll call it a cash box, right? Stole cash from a place in the total of, I think, $60. Because that detective could solve this with phone calls to just that company and then follow up to me to figure out who was working of us, and then they just had to call them, and it's $50. So, you know, hey, just cop to it so that way we can mark this as solved. Okay, don't do that again. That's pretty much as far as it went there. But because it was like that, I got 3-4 phone calls about it. I got 0 phone calls about the stolen firearm. 0. In fact, I got sent a letter that said, if you don't return this letter, we're going to assume your gun wasn't actually stolen, and we're going to remove it off the National Stolen Gun Registry. That's right. That's how that works. You would think it'd be the other way around, where if you don't send us a letter, the serial number is going to stay on as a stolen gun. But how it works is you get sent a letter and it says you have to respond within 10 days stating your gun is still stolen in order for your serial numbers to remain on the stolen gun registry. And
Wow.
like most things, I didn't get that letter until 3 days before that 10-day period was up. So it's not exactly, I don't know if that gun is even still on the registration as a stolen firearm,
Right.
So what are we trying to do here? What is the point? Are we trying to solve crimes and make it so where we can conduct our rights to life, liberty, and property without having to be worried about somebody else stealing it from us? Or are we just, I don't know, are we just trying to create issues out here?
To me, the qualified immunity one is important, though, and to me, though, it goes hand in hand with the malpractice insurance.
Yes.
I mean, to me, those two go together.
Yeah, that would naturally, of course, be and honestly, too, you wouldn't necessarily have to deal with the repeal of qualified immunity because you're not suing the officer. You're suing the insurance company of the officer. With that
Yeah, I don't
result. Not saying that qualified immunity should still exist. I'm saying it is a legal hurdle that with this plan you wouldn't have to worry about overcoming, which could be an issue for locales to be able to address the issue on a local level and not having to move the needle on a national level, since, of course, that is a national issue, not just a local issue.
I'm going to go with move the needle from now on. I like that better.
You like that? Move the needle?
Move
Have
the
you never
needle.
heard that one before?
No, I know move the needle, but that's not what we coined. What we coined is move the needle.
Well, it's my first time on camera, Robert. You got to be nicer to me. You got to set your standards lower, okay? Can I get Joe Biden?
No, lower. Lower.
Give me Joe Biden standards, okay? I stayed awake through the whole thing. All right. I remember what state I was in.
Yeah, I'll just be quiet for 45 seconds and see if Andrew can avoid the ditch.
If I can handle it, I got you.
Yeah, that's where Trump messed up, man.
He did.
I mean, Joe Biden can still counterpunch. I mean, he still got those instincts.
Push-up competition in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah.
He will.
It's just
leave
him alone. Leave him alone. See if he can drive straight down the road. This is the can you drive straight down the road challenge.
What was it? 2 days ago? I know we're off in the weeds now, but 2 days ago, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, all in one day, he forgot what state he was in. He said he's running for senator again instead of president. He forgot Mitt Romney's name. He only ran against him once. He's like, the Mormon from Utah that I ran against,
Yeah.
That is quite worrisome. But at the end of the day, when you got a duopoly, you get what you get, and you get what you get.
Mm-hmm. There's a South Park episode for that. So anyway, I think we've covered it all, man. Thanks for joining. This was a lot of fun. Definitely some new ideas to consider. Excellent. And by the way, thanks for all your awesome work with D6.
Oh, sure. I'm just out here getting it done.
Yeah, D6 is, and I know it's not just you. I know other people are doing stuff too, but you guys have made an awesome little team. D6 has been absolutely transformed these last 6 months, and it's crazy awesome to see.
Well, I gotta say, I once heard, I think it was in 10-Minute Manager or something like that. You might know where, but the true quality of a leader is the ability to lead volunteers.
Right.
That's how you can tell a great leader from a bad one. Can they lead volunteers? And I have to say, Charles is the chair here. He's a pretty good leader. He can definitely lead volunteers. He definitely knows when to get out of the way, and he knows when to step in and help. If you need help, he'll help you. If you seem like you got it handled, he definitely doesn't feel like he's got to put his stamp on it, And that definitely has been a big help in getting D6 put together here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the moment I met him, I knew he was a fireball of energy. It took all of like 10 seconds. I'm like, whoa, who is this guy?
he's got the energy there. We're doing the family day at Jacobson Park on Saturday.
Yeah. Oh
So,
man.
if you want to come out, we're getting an inflatable bounce house. We're right there by the pond. You can fish even. All kinds of stuff. I was going to do a libertarian treasure hunt, but I don't know.
Right.
We'll see. We'll see if I can get my wife to do it for me.
Well, not to dissuade too many people from going, but my wife's already got tickets. We're going, so I will be there.
There you go. So
I will be there.
So yeah, you guys got to check it out. Come on out, Jacobson Park. The one, the only Robert Perry will be there.
Yeah, and if you've not, I know all libertarians like being closet libertarians. We like just being left alone. But number one, I think that's largely because our life experience is going out and being with people who aren't like us. And I think once you hang out with libertarians, you're going to realize, hey, people can be awesome. Number two is the people who think differently than us. They like going out and meddling with things. And for us to take them on, we're going to have to leave our freaking closet. We're going to have to get out there. So this is nice, comfy stepping stone. Go fishing.
I think we have to almost recognize there is a place for government, and that is small and local, and where you have your freedom of choice to move about based upon what you like, what you don't like, what laws you like, what laws you don't like. If you feel like you're fitting in there, I mean, we see it on a large scale of California to Texas, New York to Florida, but the ability to move about and make your freedom of choice decisions where you live. But, keeping government local gives you that freedom of choice where you don't feel that push as much. But we have to recognize that, to your point, and one of my big pushes, if you take, for example, a look at my Andrew the Libertarian page and Instagram, if you take a good look at that, you'll see a lot of the memes and the jokes and things I personally make are about getting libertarians to vote sometimes. I know one of your supporters was at a sign waving event and mentioned that one of the people waving the sign there said he wasn't even going to vote. And it's like, why are you out here waving a sign then, or why are you part of a political party? You don't accidentally register as a libertarian. Like people are Republicans or people are Democrats because like, well, my mom was one, my dad was one when I was, went to fill out my unvolunteer service card. I whatever it may be, right?
Right.
People don't accidentally end up being libertarians. Yet there's 13,000 of them in the state of Kentucky, registered LPs. And that didn't happen by accident. And it's just about our ability to get, as many of them as possible active. For sure.
Yeah. And if anyone needs anything, Charles is over here waving his hand if anyone needs me. So if you need Charles, ping him.
He's there for you. If you need me,
Charles is there for you.
Charles is there for you too.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Andrew, thanks for contributing some ideas to the conversation.
Absolutely. Until next time, you'll have to, next time I write an article you want to talk to me about, just let me know.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone.